Welcome back to my YouTube channel, everyone. This is Frank DeMar with the End Times Research Ministry. The last day of September the 30th of 2016. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about being Democrat or Republican, because to me at this point it really doesn't matter. And what I did is I wrote up a post today that I'm going to be reading the post and then connecting the dots between the current news and does it really matter if you're Democrat or Republican in view of what's taking place not only in America but on the world stage as far as it goes with the world economy. I don't care if you are white, black, brown, yellow, or any other color. If you are in the United States middle class, you are already in trouble. Just about every part of your life has been affected over the past 8 years. For one moment, put aside, if you can, whether you are a Democrat or Republican. Just forget what any of the mainstream media is trying to push down all our throats to get us to vote for the person they want us to vote for. That includes CNN liberal or Fox News conservative. Let us all step out of the news box and look at the following. If you are a single or if you are married with a family, before you vote this year, ask yourself the following questions. Number one, over the past 8 years, has my life improved? Now keep in mind, the reason why I'm saying 8 years is because the Democrats have been in office for 8 years. But I really don't care if it's Democrat or Republican, because we have people from both parties that have done really virtually nothing to help anybody get out of the middle class and move up. Number two, over the past 8 years, how many times did I get a raise? Now, if things are supposed to be so good in America, why aren't people getting raises? And I know that there are millions of people who haven't gotten a raise in 8 years. As a matter of fact, you probably have got a decrease in your pay. Question number three that you should be asking. Over the past 8 years, has the government lowered taxes that has helped me with my bills? Out of their own mouths, who will be hurting you or your family by raising my taxes even higher? Democratic or Republican, after the election, if your taxes go up as promised, what part of your household budget are you going to cut because more of your hard-earned money will be taken? Number four, over the past 8 years, how much more am I paying for medical bills? Number five, over the past 8 years, do I see anything coming from the government that makes me feel that I do not have to worry about ISIS attacks? Number six, over the past 8 years, has my job or jobs been taken away because it was cut and given to someone who came to America illegal? If you did get a job, was it a good paying job with benefits, or are you one of the millions of Americans who are working more than one job to make ends meet? If you were one of the lucky ones to get a job, is it a 40-hour-a-week job, or like most jobs gotten in the past few years are jobs that only have 30 hours to avoid paying you benefits? Number seven, the U.S. debt is heading toward $20 trillion with no end in sight. How long do you think it will be before you, if you are single, or your family, if you are married, will be able to hold up when the government has to close its doors? Democratic or Republican, if the road the U.S. is on now via the debt continues, the government will not have funds to pay unemployment or issue welfare payments. How long will you be able to live before you are homeless? Number eight, seeing the current economic landscape, how long do you think the average middle-class person will take before they will be able to buy their first home. Number 9, over the last 8 years, has the government done anything to stop crime other than try to pass new bills that will take guns away from people who do not commit crimes? I ask this question as a husband with this in mind. If the government takes a gun from the average person who is law-abiding and that family one night finds his home was broken into, what will you use to protect your family or yourself if you're single? Since you will not be able to have a gun, will you use a baseball bat against the person who is pointing a gun at you? Good luck. Keep in mind, I do not care if you are from one party or the other. The man pointing the gun at you and or your family doesn't care what party you belong to. Number 10. There are many young people who are thinking about joining the military because they cannot find a good job. You need to ask this question: who do I believe will protect me as a soldier when I enlist, Clinton or Trump? Who do I believe would leave a fallen soldier behind, Clinton or Trump? Number 11. Do I want our government to continue to allow people to cross over into America illegally and be able to tap in to free schooling, welfare, and take jobs away from U.S. citizens? Number 12. If you are in fact black, ask yourself this question. Over the past 8 years, have you seen the black community get out of the lower class ranks? During the past 8 years, if you are black under a black president, did they help you up the ladder as he promised, or has it gotten so bad under a black president that a Black Matters movement has been birthed? If you are honest, you must be asking yourself, why are so many blacks killing blacks? This leads me to the next question. During the last 8 years, how many Americans have gotten killed because of drugs? How many communities in America are watching their kids killed because of running drugs? Ask yourself this question as well. Why is drug use so heavy in poor black community? Is it because they think this type of activity is the only way out of the poor neighborhoods? When Obama came to Chicago, his own hometown, did he not promise you a change? After 8 years in office, if you live in the poorest section of Chicago, do you feel safer? Take a look at these facts. Chicago year-to-date 2016. Shot and killed 509. Shot and wounded 2,746. Total shot 3,255. Total homicides 566, and the numbers are continuing to grow. For many of you who live in Chicago, you did get your change, but sadly, someone in your family may have been one of the statistics above. Number 13, ask yourself this: do I want a wall to help keep out illegals, drugs, and ISIS, or do I want to keep it as is and see more of the same, which will mean more drugs coming to our cities, and of course that will lead to more crime? Plus, no wall will mean more of a chance that ISIS can sneak into the U.S. and attack more U.S. citizens than have already been attacked. In my book, The Last Chronicles of Planet Earth, I discuss the economic state of not only the U.S. but the world. Jesus shows us in the scriptures that just before he returns to earth, the Antichrist will come, and it will be he who controls the world's economy. This can only happen if there is a major world economic collapse. No nation in their right mind would just hand over all their power to one man to control a world economy. But that is exactly what we see from Scripture. And see Revelation chapter 13, verses 15 through 17. And I would really focus in on verse 16. So let's go over there and I'll show you what that says. in verse 15 through 17, it's in reference to this Antichrist. And you read in verse 16, it says this. Jesus is talking about this Antichrist who will have control. And he, that's the Antichrist, causes all, both small and great, rich or poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, say he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So eventually what's going to happen is the economy is going to bust, the world economy. And one man will get power from all the governments, and he will control the world's economy. And it won't be an economy based on paper money. It's going to be an economy based on some form of ID in the skin. Something completely different that we have right now. But a disaster has to come in order for each one of the nations, the leaders, to say, we need someone to get us out of this mess. And they'll pick the Antichrist, and eventually what will happen is he'll be able to control everything, to the point that eventually, during the tribulation period, anybody who doesn't take the mark of the beast will be killed, because their allegiance is not gone to the Antichrist. And I'll cover this a little bit more in this post. So let's go back. I'm going to pick it up right here. It says, the path the U.S. is on right now via the unpayable debt are factors that are leading to this world economic collapse that will bring on the Antichrist. Fact is, whether you are a Democrat or Republican, if you are honest with yourself, you know something is very wrong with America and things are not getting better. Also, if you have been watching the world news, you know that nation after nation are falling into deep economic woes like the likes this generation has not seen. Below are examples. So I want to bring you over to show you that the road we're on, the road that Hillary Clinton is talking about and the road that Donald Trump is talking about, are completely two different roads. And the most important road that you want to be on, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, would be on the road that Jesus wants you to be on the road. The road that we know will be fulfilled in Scripture. So let's take a look first at this link. And this came out August the 8th of 2015. I'm just showing you what's going on in the world scene. 7 countries near bankruptcy, and there's a lot more now since this article came out. But for the examples, I just want to play the video and give you some of the information.
Douglas McIntyre, the editor at 24/7 Wall Street, and today we're going to look at 7 countries that are nearing bankruptcy. This is a good time to look at this list because Puerto Rico just went into default. So we turned to Moody's Investor Services and looked at countries that had extremely poor risk of going into default. There were 7 countries on this list. Number 7 is Belarus, followed by Argentina in 6th place. Douglas McIntyre, the editor at 24/7 Wall Street, and today we're going to look at 7 countries that are nearing bankruptcy. This is a good time to look at this list because Puerto Rico just went into default. So we turned to Moody's Investor Services and looked at countries that had extremely poor risk of going into default. There were 7 countries on this list. Number 7 is Belarus, followed by Argentina in 6th place, Jamaica 5th, Belize in 4th, and then taking a quick look at the balance, Venezuela is number 3 on the list. The reason for that is simple. The huge majority of Venezuela's exports are oil. As the price of crude drops sharply from almost $100 a year ago to closer to $45 now, the amount that Venezuela brings into its national treasury has collapsed. Not a shock to anybody, number 2 is Greece. Greece's GDP has now gone down for 3 years in a row. It has been negotiating furiously with the European Union and IMF for restructuring its debt. And in that restructuring, its creditors have asked for it to take on more austerity. In theory, austerity ruins the economy, so this becomes a vicious circle. Number one on the list is Ukraine. Obviously, the big problem there is that the country is effectively at war with Russia. One of the things that this does is it tremendously disrupts a lot of the service and agriculture industries that drive the economy. And Ukraine has become so desperate that it has had to turn to the IMF to look for short-term loans so that it can pay off its debts. So what can people take away from this? These countries have two things in common. The first is that they've taken over a lot of debt, not just over the last 2 or 3 years, but over extended periods of time. The other one is that most of them have economies which are moving towards ruin or are already there. And that means their ability to pay back debt is very, very low.
Now, what you saw there is exactly what the United States is going through. Almost $20 trillion of debt. So without the politicians telling you, we're a lot closer to collapse than most people believe. But there is somebody who's talking about a bubble. And that person is Donald Trump. Now, when you go to my website today, if you're on YouTube, when you go over to my website, you'll see some other articles about Puerto Rico, and you can click those links right here, and you could read that information if you want. But I want to go over to this next one now. The run begins. Deutsche Bank hedge fund clients withdraw excess cash. Germany's banks, they're on a run right now. Deutsche Bank concerns just went to 11 as Bloomberg reports a number of funds that clear derivative trades with Deutsche Bank AG have withdrawn some excess cash in positions held at the lender, a sign of counterparties mounting concerns about doing business with Europe's largest investment bank. Now, without going into a huge dissertation, this is a major deal for these banks. And it's just another one of the signs that there's economic ripples that are going in different countries continuously now. And Germany is no exception. Keep in mind, Germany was one of the largest and the most powerful nations in the European Union. So if they're having problems, that is definitely a sign major difficulties for the world's economy are just before us. Now, in that video, they talked about Venezuela in 2015. And since 2015, Venezuela has plundered into chaos. So much so that Venezuela food crisis deepens as shipments plummet. And this came out on August 11th of 2016. And there's some other articles about hungry Venezuelans cry at the sight of food as economic crisis. Let's go over there for a second. I'm trying to establish the point here that there's problems, world economic problems that are leading to the fulfillment of Revelation chapter 13, where Jesus talks about the coming of the Antichrist. Now, what we're seeing from Venezuela is a microcosm of what's going to happen to our planet in all these different countries when the Antichrist comes. And we know this for a fact because Jesus gave us the specific details about famines, about nations coming against each other, and that means Venezuelans against Venezuelans, and other major problems like famines, which we're seeing here in Venezuela. So listen to what's going on in Venezuela.
Witnesses described it as a sea of people. Tens of thousands of Venezuelans rushed to the border and Táchira state over the weekend when the government decided to temporarily open the border with Colombia. People don't have any food, this woman said. We're forced to do this and risk being crushed to death so that we can get across the border and get some food. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro ordered the border closed last August after a clash between Colombian paramilitary and Venezuelan troops. Since then, Venezuelans have been suffering all kinds of shortages. Even basic food products are scarce, as we were able to witness recently in Caracas, the capital. Visiting a supermarket is a good way to illustrate the collapse of the Venezuelan economy and the shortages and inflation that Venezuelan consumers are experiencing right now. For example, I'm standing here in the middle of this aisle. There should be milk on the shelves, and as you can see, they're completely empty. Earlier this month, about 1,000 desperate women dressed in white overwhelmed border authorities and crossed into Colombia. This weekend, Colombian migration authorities said nearly 100,000 Venezuelans went across.
Queremos que abran eso para al menos llegar y...
We want the border reopened for good, this man says. We need to resupply our pantries because here in Venezuela, we have nothing. Socialist President Nicolás Maduro says he's the victim of an economic war that seeks to destabilize the country and topple his government. Back at the border, a pregnant woman walks into Colombia hoping to be able to feed her family and her soon-to-be-born child. Not too far away, an elderly woman walks with the help of a cane. Politics is far from their mind. For now, all they can think of is filling their stomach. Rafael Romo, CNN, Caracas.
Continuing on, I do have other news that you can see at my website when you get over there, but now I want to turn our attention to what the UN fears. This came out September the 22nd, 2016. UN fears third leg of global finance crisis with prospect of epic debt defaults. The third leg of the world's intractable depression is yet to come. If trade economics at the United Nations are right, the next traumatic episode may entail the greatest death jubilee in history. It may also prove to be the definitive crisis of globalized capitalism, the demise of the liberal free market orthodoxy promoted for almost 40 years by the Bretton Woods Institution, the OECD, and the Davos fraternity. Alarm bells have been ringing over the explosion of corporate debt levels merging economies, which now exceed $25 trillion. Damaging deflationary spirals cannot be ruled out, said the annual report of the UN Conference on Trade and Development. So just another example to show you major problems in the world. And in this case, they're worried about a depression. Now in my book, when I wrote my book, the first book that I wrote, and I've been updating it for you ever since I wrote that book, I talked about depression coming not only in the United States but on the world scene based on what we know from Scripture. And it comes to me as no surprise that this is what we're seeing now, and this is what we're being warned over and over again. Europe almost defaulted a couple years ago. Now they're back having the same kind of problem, and you could see all these other nations as well having the same difficulties, and they're getting worse. They are not getting better, and this is what Jesus said. In the last days, these events would be played out like birth pangs, and the birth pangs are definitely with us right now. Now, one of the most powerful nations when it comes to economically has been Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia is in huge trouble, and I put up 3 different reports for you so that when you go over to my website, if you're on my YouTube channel, you could read these, but I'll just read the headlines for you. Saudi Arabia injects $5.3 billion into banks to ease the crunch. Who would have thought that this oiled giant who has so much oil would be in so much trouble financially? Second one, Saudi cuts public sector bonuses, ministers' salaries. So just like in the United States, when Barack Obama's administration forced so many workers in America to cut back in the hours, and some people were working without even getting paid because they were worried about if they didn't follow the instructions, they would lose their job altogether. So many were taking losses thinking that things would get better. But all we saw from it was more jobs without benefits in less hours, going to 30 hours, which, as you saw from my earlier part of this presentation, all that did was cause the employer not to have to pay out benefits. And here's the third one. Saudi firm tells staff to forget owed paid if they want passports back. So essentially blackmailing the people. If they wanted to leave their country, stop complaining about what's taking place in Saudi Arabia. Now, that moves us down to a prophecy about gold and silver. And this prophecy, as we know from the Revelation chapter 18, what it essentially is telling us is that in the last days, gold and silver are going to be sky high, without a question, right? That's clear. And people are going to be weeping because the loss of gold. This is what I wrote in that post, but I wanted to read it so that you understand clearly. One thing is very clear. Jesus warned us about the gold and the silver in the last days. Without a question, the prices of gold and silver will skyrocket. When you take in account what we see in the scriptures in the photo above and the word Jesus told us about people working all day for one small meal, what we know is during the last days, when the world economy collapses, paper money will be worthless, and those who have gold and silver will be able to survive much better than the people holding paper currency. Keep in mind, the wealth of gold and silver will be short-lived, as Jesus will take these precious metals away during the tribulation. And just as the scriptures tell us, people will weep over the loss. People do not cry over items that are not worth something, and gold and silver will be worth a lot for a while. Does Donald know something from the Lord that you do not know? As you will see below, Donald has been warning Americans that the U.S. is in an economic bubble. Donald knows what is coming when the bubble breaks and what is the best way for Donald to get himself and his business ready for when it busts. If Jesus shows gold will go through the roof, why not get as much as you can now before the economy crashes? Guess what? This is exactly what Donald has done. There was an article about this, and the article states Donald Trump accepts gold bullion, real money, as lease payment from commercial tenant. The return of real money has made a triumphant re-entry into the U.S. economy with the recent acceptance by the Trump Organization of gold bullion as payment for a commercial lease property. Epmex, one of the largest dealers of precious metals in the U.S., paid Donald Trump's company 1 kilobars, roughly 96.45 troy ounces of 0.9999 pure gold as a security deposit for its newly leased space on the 50th floor of 40 Wall Street, also known as the Trump Building. So Donald, being a smart man in business, who is talking about this bubble that's coming, I believe is preparing himself, just like the scriptures say, that the gold is really going to skyrocket. And the people are holding the gold, again, for a while, and you'll see why, going to go through the roof, and that the people holding the gold will be in a much better position than anyone who's holding that paper money. Now, as far as that bubble that I was referring to, that Donald was talking about, I want you to watch this.
Trump was on Good Morning America, and he was speaking about the economy, and he said something that's actually
spot on, and nobody else is really talking about it. He said, quote, "It's a very daunting task, and we're in deep trouble. We're in a bubble. And frankly, if there's going to be a bubble popping, I hope they pop before I become president, because I don't want to inherit all this stuff." Okay, well, wait, Donald, if it pops before you become president, the economy is still going to be in the dumps if you were to take office at that time. So that part makes no sense. But he's right about just the fact that we're in a bubble and nobody else is really talking about it. Typically from the Republican candidates, they'll attack Obama for his record on the economy, but all their attacks just happen to be wrong. They happen to be factually incorrect. Like they'll attack his jobs record and the unemployment rate. It's like, wait. But in those areas, he's actually done a decent job. You know, say what you want about the troubles in the economy, and I do, and I will, But with private sector job creation, he's done pretty good. With the unemployment rate, he's done pretty good. So they always manage to find the one area where it makes no sense to attack Obama, and they attack Obama on that. But Donald Trump is actually presenting an attack here that is coherent and actually makes sense. I think we are in a bubble, and I think we are kind of in trouble here. So I've been talking about this for a while. The economy has, in many ways, massively improved under Obama. Just to give you one fact, when George W. Bush left office, he had net lost 646,000 private sector jobs under his administration. With Obama, there's been over 12 million private sector jobs created. But here's the catch to that. So it's better, don't get me wrong, but most of those jobs were low-wage jobs. So it was low-wage job growth. And this gigantic rebound of the stock market that people are talking about from where it was when Bush left office to where it is today, I think that a lot of that is just, reinflating the bubble. So it's just a matter of time, in my opinion, until we have another crash, and it's a matter of what's going to set it off. We have a student loan debt crisis of over $1.2 trillion. We have consumer debt of over $3 trillion. Like I said, we have a reinflated housing bubble. It was the subprime mortgage crisis before. Housing prices rebounded. They're right about where they were before the crash. So, that's unsustainable. It's not like people actually have the money to be getting mortgages and buying houses and stuff. So, and one of the tricks, by the way, is Wall Street went around and bought up all these places where people were kicked out of their homes. They bought up all these places, and now they're renting them back out to people. Ooh, not good. We're doing tricks. This is tricks. You reinflated the housing bubble. And then there's also an unregulated derivatives market of trillions of dollars. And we have a stagnant middle class with the highest levels of income inequality since the Great Depression. And as a result of that, what happens? Well, the jig is up because then the middle class and poor people can't afford to buy the consumer goods that are made by the so-called captains of industry anymore. So the economy grinds to a halt. And it's just a matter of time until, there's a giant crash. So it needs to be... The point is, the fundamentals of the economy are beyond fucked up. And to point out that we're in a bubble is actually true. And there's a political aspect to this as well, which is very scary to think about, which is we've had President Obama in office for a while now. So if the crash happens before he leaves office, obviously people are going to go see liberal ideas are the problem. And the reality, of course, is not that liberal ideas are the problem. The problem is that President Obama did conservative ideas, implemented center-right ideas, which kicked the ball down the road a little bit, and we're going to be presented with the same problem again in just a matter of time. So the problem, they're going to say Dodd-Frank, see, regulation failed, deregulate everything. No. The problem was Dodd-Frank didn't do enough regulation. It didn't do efficient regulation. There were tremendous loopholes in Dodd-Frank. And, the banks went back and Wall Street went back basically to doing what they were doing beforehand. That's the problem. The reality is you need efficient, smart regulation. You need to bring back Glass-Steagall. You need to break up the big banks. Who's calling for these things? That's right, Bernie Sanders is. I mean, that's going to be the solution. But because Obama did half measures, if that, if the crash happens under him or just after he gets out of office, people are going to say, see, liberal ideas are the problem, and then we're in trouble. Because then people can literally... You're at a crossroads. You have a decision to make when, the establishment, centrist, corporatist ideas fail, as they always do. Where are you going to go? There's a fork in the road. You either got to go far right, weird pseudo-fascism, Donald Trump style, Ted Cruz style, or you got to veer left and go social democracy style and actually fix the underlying problems in the economy. And, it all depends on when the crash happens. And it all depends on how the American people interpret what happened with the crash. But either way, it's a scary thing. And it would have been better if we just dealt with the fundamental problems when the original crash happened in 2008. And if Obama came in and he was a second FDR, and he didn't do a half-measure stimulus package that had a lot of tax cuts in it. He didn't do bailouts and without strings attached and then not re-regulate efficiently. He should have addressed these problems from day one in an FDR Part 2 kind of way, and then we wouldn't have to worry about this bubble that we're clearly in today.
So without a question, he's even talking about you're going to have to make a decision. Now, one last question I have Could it be the Lord has given us a chance for more time? Is it possible that the Lord has revealed his plan to Mark Taylor back in 2011 about Donald Trump? So far, everything Mark Taylor said Jesus told him about Trump has come to pass. This November, we will all know if Jesus did show Mark the future. As to all the questions you should ask yourself, I am sure the video will shed some light on who you will pick. Now in that write-up I said the video you watch will help you to show who you're going to pick. But what I did is I put in a couple more videos for you to watch. And one of those first videos is the video about the prophecy of Trump. Now this week I put up this prophecy that came out in 2011. This is not the same video. There's more information about this, and with this other information, I think your eyes will be open to asking yourself these very important questions. Because in the last section of what I wrote today, this is what I said. Democrat or Republican, we all are in the same boat, and it isn't about Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. It is about Jesus Christ and whether or not you believe the Antichrist will come and control the world's economic system, which will lead to the Lord's second coming. Now, you'll see a scripture here in John 19:11. It says this, Jesus answered, and he was talking to Pontius Pilate. Pilate had asked him a question because Pilate was telling him that he has control over what happens to Jesus. And this is Jesus' response. You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. Whether you believe this or not, and I believe the words that Jesus said here, anybody that is put in power is put in power because that's what Jesus Christ has ordained. No person, man or woman, I don't care what creed or color, has been placed in a position without the authority of Jesus Christ. And Jesus himself told this to Pontius Pilate when Pilate thought that he had control over him. So, as I said in the beginning of this post, we will see who Jesus is going to give power to, and so far all I have seen and heard was Jesus spoke to Mark Taylor in 2011 and said that he chose Donald Trump. Now, is Hillary Clinton the kind of person that you want in office? We're getting a lot of information about these WikiLeaks that are coming out about Hillary Clinton. And we know for a fact, if you're watching ABC, CBS, or whatever mainstream news, the liberal media is trying to cut the legs off of Donald Trump. But according to the Mark Taylor prophecy that Jesus gave to him in 2011, no matter what happens, Donald Trump will be the president. So keep on the watch with me, and we'll see who it is that Jesus has installed into power. And we will know at that time in November whether Mark Taylor is a true prophet and God really spoke to him, or if he doesn't become president, he would be another one of those false prophets. If Hillary Clinton gets elected, the road to the Antichrist definitely will be set. The economy will definitely crash a lot sooner and a lot harder than most people believe. Whether you are a Democrat or Republican, keep on the watch, because Jesus is talking to us via the news and his signs that he warned us would take place. Those signs are already here. Are you ready? God bless.